Know about naming compounds, and we're going to learn how to name compounds that have transition metals and these special things called polyatomic ions. So, what is a polyatomic ion? It's a group of atoms that behave as a unit and they carry a charge. So if you look down here, there's some examples. SO3 has a 2 minus charge. This thing acts as one unit. It can't be separated. It's the 2 minus charge is not on the O. It's on this whole thing. And it has a special name. We'll learn some of those names eventually, but right now we need to just kind of learn what polyatomic means. You might know the word poly means many, and atomic means atoms, so many atoms, so it's at least 2 atoms. Again, they act as one group, and they carry one charge as a group. One group of atoms, and they carry a charge. Oops, I skipped the slide. Sorry. I'm going crazy here. Alright. I'm not too worried about knowing this definition of ternary ionic compounds, meaning there's 3 different elements. The reason they exist is because one is a metal, and then one is a polyatomic ion. So that already has 2. So the 1 metal plus the 2 in the polyatomic are 1 and 2, and that's where we're going to go from there. So if we look here, here's an element in group 2. So it has a 2 plus charge, meaning it's a metal. And here's a polyatomic ion. This whole group here has a 2 minus charge. Well, 2 plus and 2 minus cancel out, so we can combine them just together, CaCO3. We still name that first thing as the name of the element, calcium, but there's special names for the polyatomic ions, that CO3 is carbonate. Now there's a list I'm going to give you so you can identify them, but there's 5 you're going to have to memorize for the quiz, but I'm going to show you a trick to do that too, so it won't be as bad as long as you know the trick. Alright, here's another example, except slightly different here. Here's our calcium again, so we already know it's a metal with a plus 2, and this, what's called a nitrate ion, only has a -1 charge. Well, that doesn't cancel out. Remember, 2 and 1 are not equal, so we have to get this charge to be -2, and the only way we can do that is add a whole nother unit, because one of these NO3s is -1, so we need to have 2 of them, and we can only do that by adding little numbers, because that tells us how many we have. So if I have 2 of these, well, 2 times 1, -1 is -2, now they cancel out, and that's how we got the formula for CaNO3, parentheses 2, it's still called calcium nitrate, because this is a nitrate. Now, I'm going to get to the list soon here, so you don't keep wondering, how am I going to know NO3, this and that. You're either going to you'll have this printed out for you. So if you don't have it now, maybe take a screenshot of it, and I'll give you the handout when you get to class. So if you're naming something and you see something crazy that you have no idea what it is, nitrate, hydroxide, just look it up here. But there are 5 of these that I will want you to know, and these are the 5 down here. Nitrate, carbonate, chlorate, sulfate, and phosphate. Here's one. Nitrate, carbonate, chlorate, and phosphate. Now, if you spend enough time, you could memorize those and be fine. It's only 5, but there's a trick that makes it way easier to make sure you're right without ever making a silly mistake. So press pause to put this in your notes first, and then I'll show you the trick. So, I don't know why it's not popping up, but I will get out of here and open it up for you. There it is. That's odd. Alright, give me a quick second, a little technical difficulty. Alright, so we are going to watch this video because it's super important to know how to do this.
Meet Grammarly Go,
Fortunately, we got
your go-to solution for getting quality work done quickly.
So from time to time, it's nice to find memory tools to help you remember important things. You know that in writing chemical equations, if you want to get fast, you have to kind of commit to memory certain things. And one of those things is the formulas and charges of the polyatomic ions. Monatomic ions are easy. You just look at the periodic table and you get them.
Skip ahead a little till he gets to his sentence.
Just have to remember this sentence. Nick?
So, this is the sentence you need to remember, and I'll probably put it on the board if you remind me for the test, because in itself, it's not giving you any answers, but it is giving you a big trick that he's going to explain, and then I'll kind of summarize for you.
The camel ate a clam supper in Phoenix. Sounds kind of silly, and if you kind of picture in your head a camel named Nick eating a clam supper in Phoenix, Arizona, it's a silly picture. It'll maybe hopefully stick with you. Well, the thing about this sentence, Nick the camel ate a clam supper in Phoenix, is that it helps you to remember 5 of the most important polyatomic ions. And I'm going to show you how it works. I kind of gave you a little bit of a clue with the red letters here, but essentially, these are the 8s, which is why the word 8 is underlined. So this is nitrate and carbonate and chlorate and sulfate and phosphate. If you want to remember those formulas, you can use this sentence to help you do it. And the key is in each of the words. The first letter of the word, the one in red, tells you which 8 we're talking about. So Nick is for nitrate, and camel is for carbonate, and clam, Cl, that's for chlorate, and supper, that's for sulfate, and P, phosphorus, right?
And in fact, he says the first letter, but it's really the first 2. Remember, Ni, nitrate, Ca, carbonate. He already said Cl was chlorate, Su, sulfate, and pH, phosphate. So it's not just the first letter. The first 2 give you that big clue. And make sure you don't get confused between the 2 C's. Ca is carbonate, Cl, chlorate.
Phosphate. So that's the key, is that you figure out which one you're working with. And then you're going to count consonants and vowels. Okay? The consonants.
All right. I'll explain this for you. I'm going to get a smaller screen so I can write on it. So, let's look at nitrate. He says the number of consonants is the number of oxygens in it. So the N is nitrogen. So we'll write the N for that. The O, there's always going to be O's. So you don't have to remember that. Every one of these has O's. And how many does it have? 1, N is a consonant, C is a consonant, K is a consonant. So that means there's 3. So that's the formula. 3 consonants equals 3 oxygens. N stands for the N. That's where that came from. The vowels is the negative charge this unit carries. So I is the only vowel here, meaning NO3, nitrate, is -1 charge. Let's apply it to carbonate. Carbon is C. It's given to you right there. How do we know how many oxygens? We count those consonants. 1, 2, 3. So CO3. How do we know the charge on this? We count the vowels. 1, 2, and it's -2. Remember, this part of the sentence is just telling us every one of these words ends in 8. Nitrogen becomes nitrate, carbon becomes carbonate, chlorine, chlorate, and so forth. So let's go through the last 3, and then we'll be done with this little video. Cl, well, that's the chlorine for chlorate. How many consonants? 1, 2, 3. So that means there's 3 oxygens. How many vowels? 1. So that means our charge is -1. Sulfur is S. How many O's do we have? 1 consonant, 2, 3, 4 this time. So SO4. Then we have 1, 2 vowels. So it has a -2 charge. P for phosphate. P, how many consonants? 1, 2, 3, 4. So PO4. How many vowels? 1, 2, 3. So it has a -3 charge. We'll practice that a much. Eventually, we're going to start thinking of nitrate as Nick and chlorate as Clam, and it'll become easier over time. So let's get back to this. Get this out of here. All right. Go ahead and pause while you put that. I suppose you could memorize this bottom chart, but the sentence Nick the Camel ate a clam supper in Phoenix is going to be a lot easier. So pause while you fill this, and then we'll continue. Go ahead and practice this, and I'm not even going to give the answers because you can go back and check, but start getting into which word is this. This is Nick. Practice the pattern. Carbonate is Ca camel. Chlorinate, Cl was clam. If you want to, Google search this, but we're not going to do the song break for you. Alright, so that takes care of our polyatomic part of this notes. Now, if our first element is a transition metal, so groups 3 through 14, not group 1 and 2. 1 and 2 is our friends. Those are easy. Name the first metal, put "ide" in the second non-metal, and you're good. But this case, we have to add something. We have to add a Roman numeral to tell us the charge of that transition metal, because they can have more than one charge. So saying gold sulfide isn't good enough. Gold can have 2 different charges because it's a transition metal. So here's an example. Here is our formula. Oxygen, if you look on the periodic table, has a straight -2 charge. Copper has a 1 charge. How would we know that? Well, I'm going to show you in a second, but for this to equal Cu and O to cancel each other out, we would need 2 coppers to make that a 2 to cancel out the -2. But each one of these, since there's 2 of them, has a +1 charge, so we write copper, that's the name of the element, 1 in Roman numerals, that's the charge of this copper, and then, just like before, oxide. So the big difference is adding these charges. I'm sure that's confusing. We'll make it easier. And here's the easier. Something called the crisscross method. The crisscross method, the backwards crisscross, will give us the Roman numeral every time. So how's this work? Alright, if you are given this, FeCl3 to name, you're going to find Fe, you're going to see it's not in group 1 or 2, and it's a transition metal, so hopefully you'll know it needs a Roman numeral. We still just name the first element, iron, and then we have to find what the charge is. Well, the charge is going to be whatever is on the nonmetal. Crisscross means take this here, and that's going to be the charge of this, 3. Well, this actually will be the charge over here also. Since there's no number, it's 1, but that's not important. What's important for us is the number that goes here. So whatever number you see for that second nonmetal is what goes in the Roman numeral. So in this case, we have iron 3 chloride, because the second element had 3 atoms of chlorine. Down here, we have FeCl2. Well, this is the important number. 2 becomes iron 2 chloride. And this is why we can't name it iron chloride. What iron is it? Is it the iron with a charge of 3 or the iron with a charge of 2? So when we start with that first element, that's a transition metal, just look to the second element, put that number into Roman numerals, and name it like we've been naming ionic compounds. First name first, ide at the end of the second. The cation, the first element we said has to show its charge, and we're going to show it in Roman numerals. So practice these 3. Pause it, look them up, and see if you're good at that crisscross method. Alright, hopefully you got all of them right, but let's see here. Remember, write the first, so that's going to be iron. This will be the charge 3, and then turn oxygen into oxide. So we got iron is the first word. Oxygen has 3 on it, so we put a 3 in parentheses. And as always, oxide. We look down here, there's no number, so it's automatically a 1. So down here, write the first word, copper. Next to that S, there's nothing, but remember, nothing always means it's 1. And then sulfur becomes sulfide. And last but not least, at the bottom, we have copper. What's this little number? 2. So I put 2 for my Roman numerals. And then chlorine becomes chloride. And that would be our answers there. Go ahead and put that in your note guide. Press pause till you have it. I'm going to skip this. We've already explained it pretty good. You can pause that and read it if you don't understand what I've said. Maybe this will be better for you. I think that backwards crisscross method is pretty good. Here you're going to practice writing the formula. So we're giving you the name lead 3 phosphate, copper 1 and carbonate, tin 2 and sulfate, copper 2 and chlorate. I'm going to do one for you to show you kind of how it's done, and then you'll practice the other 3, and then we'll give you the answers. So lead is Pb. Phosphate, remember Phoenix? Eventually you're going to remember that, but here you can just look it up, is PO4. What's this 3 tell you? It tells you the number that should go over here. This number tells you the number that should go over here. Remember crisscross. So, since it's stuck together, we're going to write the 3 outside of parentheses, and this 4 goes over here. So lead 4 phosphate, the whole unit, the polyatomic ion 3. Practice the others by pressing pause, and then I'll show you the answers. Hopefully you got them. And now your note guide's